Sweet. Okay.
Okay.
All right. All right. So this is Mr. George Nichols. My mom used to clean for him back when he lived here in Nashville, or I'm sorry, in Mount Juliet. Mr. Nichols, if you want to introduce yourself, you are welcome to do so. But if you prefer me to do it, I can do that afterwards and just edit it in when we're done. It's up to you.
Okay. I'm George Nichols, as Chris said. I was born in Johnson City, Tennessee. And that's where it all began.
Sounds good. Well, Mr. Nichols, I wanted to ask you about your experiences in the military.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, you were in the ROTC, and that's how you got involved
Right.
in the military. So how did your family and friends react when you told them about it?
They expected it. My family was military family, so to speak. My father was too old to go in World War II, but all of his younger brothers went. And as a result of them coming back from World War II and me seeing fellows on the street that I grew up in come back from Korea, I decided from a very young age that I wanted to be a soldier. And when I went to ETSU, sorry about that.
You're good.
When I went to ETSU, it being a land grant college at that time, all able-bodied males was mandatory for us to have ROTC the first 2 years. At the end of those first 2 years, if your grades were such and you received the green light from the ROTC faculty, you could go into what was called Advanced ROTC. Advanced ROTC meant that upon graduation, you would be commissioned and would go straight into the Army. And that's the route that I took. I went through Advanced ROTC, and I went on active duty right away after graduation. I went into the Army. I was in the Army, and I went into the artillery branch. I requested the artillery branch, and I got it. So I was an artillery officer from day one. But as far as my parents being concerned, no, they were happy for it because they knew that's what I wanted to do. I was a pre-med major made just because I didn't know what other area to go into, but my real desire was the military. And I had intended at that time to make it a career.
Awesome. Well, yeah, that's great that your parents supported you, and I'm glad that you were able to go into a field that you enjoyed working in.
Yes.
Was there any particular reason you chose artillery of all things?
Yes. I did not want to go into the infantry. That's the branch of the Army that sustains the majority of the casualties. Another thing about artillery, there's a lot of math there. And because you've got guns that are maybe 10 miles from a target, and the artillery people have to figure out how to hit a target from 10 miles away.
All right, that's great. Yeah. All right. Let's see. What are some of the things you remember about your first few days serving?
First few days on active duty, I was in school at the artillery school at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And I was attending what was called or what is called even today, the Artillery Officer Basic Course. In ROTC, they teach you how to be an officer.
Mhm.
In the basic courses, and they have one for each branch, but in the artillery basic course, they teach you how to be an artillery officer as opposed to an infantry officer or an armored officer or a medical service officer or an engineer officer.
Mhm. All right. If I'm not mistaken, you did mention one time, I think, that you eventually got involved in the Air Force somehow.
No, it wasn't the Air Force. I was airborne. That means I
Airborne.
jumped out of the planes that the Air Force was flying.
Okay.
And that was another desire that I had had all along. I wanted to be what they called paratrooper
Mhm.
because we were big bad guys. I wasn't so big, but we were pretty rough fellows.
Uh-huh. Sure.
And that turned out very well. I really enjoyed that.
Mhm. Right. In your opinion, what do you think was one of the most important missions that you were put on?
Good question. Very good question. There were a couple.
Okay. Yeah, if you have multiple, that's fine.
Okay. Um, when my first duty station after school, after the artillery officer basic course, was Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And after being there for 2.5 years or so, I commanded an artillery battery. An artillery battery consisted of 150 men, no women during those days, 150 guys, and we were in a state where we had to be ready to go anywhere in the world and fight
Mhm.
within, I think it was something like a week. And so our readiness had to remain very, very high. And I had to command that. I mean, I had 120 guys that I was responsible for everything. I was responsible for feeding them, clothing them, making sure they were trained, making sure our supplies were where they were, making sure our maintenance was what it should be. So that was my first mission, I'll call it, and I commanded that battery for a year. And my second most important mission was another assignment, and that was my assignment in Vietnam. I was made I started as the assistant division artillery intelligence officer. Let me describe the configuration of a division artillery unit. You have a division artillery headquarters, and then you have something called battalions. Battalions are made up of batteries. And let me see, how do I describe this? You might want to shut this off while I think of how to
Very good.
describe the configuration of an artillery unit. Okay, let's go. The basic unit in artillery is a battery. It consists of 6 howitzers. are 6 guns. If it is a 105 millimeter battery, if it's a 155 millimeter battery, they may consist only of 4 guns. But batteries make up something called battalions. Usually there are 4 batteries per battalion. And then the battalions together make up a division artillery. Got it?
Mhm.
Okay. So I was at the division artillery level, which was the level that was responsible for all of the battalions. And I was started as the assistant intelligence officer, meaning gathering information on the enemy. And I ultimately became the division artillery intelligence officer.
Wow. Yeah, it sounds like a lot of responsibility.
It was, because my job was to find the bad guys. Where are they? What is, if this is a particular unit, what are their tendencies? What do they do if they're ambushed? What are their tendencies if they're hit with artillery? What are their tendencies if they get hit with an airstrike? What are the likelihoods that they will attack us? So that was my job. And to do that, I had a lot of sources that we used. I had radar, which could hear them walking, and radar, if they fired at us, which could pick up the projectiles in the air and do a back azimuth on them to determine where they were. I would get information from the infantry, get information from the Air Force. The Air Force would drop sensors, which would pick up the smell of ammonia and know that there was somebody there, relay it to us, and we would fire artillery at it.
Sounds like really complex stuff. Wow.
It was, and then there were, for better term, there were spies who would tell you what was going on.
Mhm. And spies, I'm assuming from the American forces, like walking into Vietnam.
No, what they would be, I would have a counterpart who would manage the spies. The spies would all be Vietnamese.
Oh.
And he would go out to, I would say, I want to know what's going on in area A. He would know which people he had in area A, and he would tell his Vietnamese people who were in area A what the request was. They never knew who I was. Nobody ever knew who I was except this other American that I was talking to.
So you had people from Vietnam, I guess, sneaking into American forces. That's what you're saying?
No. The war was between North Vietnam and South Vietnam.
Okay.
But it was and the North Vietnamese consisted of 2 elements. Mm-hmm. The North Vietnamese army, called NAVA, and the Viet Cong, who were South Vietnamese, who were fighting on the side of the North Vietnamese.
Oh.
Okay. Now, the actual fighting was taking place in South Vietnam. No Americans, to my knowledge, ever went into North Vietnam, except pilots who got shot down.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes more sense. Speaking of being shot down, you, I think one time told me that you and I think one other guy came down. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah, that's correct.
Do you want
I was
to
shot
tell us
down
about
one
that?
time. I was shot down. We had an infantry unit that had walked into an ambush. It was a big, tough ambush. And I went up to fire artillery in support of them. There was another infantry unit moving, let's say, east to west to attempt to get them out. I was firing 5 artillery batteries at one time. So to put that in perspective, that's roughly, if there are 6 batteries per 6 guns per battery, that's about 30 howitzers that are firing.
Wow.
And at the same time, I'm talking to a fellow in the Air Force who was called a FAC, or a forward air controller, and he was bringing in fighter bombers. So he and I had to coordinate so his fighters wouldn't run into my artillery rounds in the air. So it was a ballet up there between the Air Force and the artillery and the infantry on the ground. And it started raining on this particular day, and I couldn't see. Meanwhile, the FAC and the jets, whom we call fast movers, they had to leave because of the weather. So that left only supporting that infantry was the artillery. So we went down to treetop level. Normally we flew at 1,500 feet. We went down to treetop level, and we got hit in the tail rotor. They fired at us, and we got hit in the tail rotor. And the tail rotor stabilizes a helicopter. And when that happened, the helicopter tilted over to the right side, which was my side. There are only 2 of us in there, the pilot and myself. It's a 2-seater. And I'm on the right, he's on the left, just like in a car. And it's tilted over my way, and the back end is spinning around and around in a circle. Luckily, we came down in something called elephant grass and didn't hit any trees. We hit elephant grass is about 6 feet tall, and it landed on the right runner, which was on my side. The pilot gunned it, and it flapped over on the other side. If you think of it like this is the helicopter. It is coming down, and it's tilted like this, and it's spinning around and around like that. All right, it lands on my side like that. He guns it. It bounces over like this, and then spins around in the grass. So, and that, remember I said there was an infantry unit coming to rescue the one that was in the ambush. I called him on the radio, and they said they had us in sight. And no sooner than we hit the ground, they surrounded the helicopter.
That was your people, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Those were American troopers.
Okay. I thought for a second you were saying that you're surrounded by the Viet Cong. Like, that does not sound good.
The Viet Cong or the North Vietnamese would have loved to get us.
I bet, yeah. Yeah. Well, we're glad that that didn't happen.
Yes, aren't we? You probably wouldn't be talking to him right now.
That's true. Yeah, well, that sounds like one heck of a time. I mean, wow.
Yeah, we did something crazy afterward. Don't ask me why, but we unbuckled
Mhm.
and we ran around to the front of the helicopter. This is the pilot and I now. And we just grabbed each other and held on to each other. Why we did that, I have no idea.
I mean, I guess after something so, I guess, traumatic like that, you'd want to be, I guess, feeling
Yeah.
safe. So that makes sense. I can't imagine. I mean, I've been on roller coasters before, and I feel scared just going down a
Yeah,
little height. I mean, I
it
can't
was
imagine
like
being shot.
a roller coaster.
A really intense one with no
Yeah.
safety. Um, but yeah, and was that the only time you went down, or was there another?
There was another, but it wasn't that dramatic.
Mhm.
We got hit. The helicopter has two that we flew as a H-13, a Bell H-13. If you ever see episodes of MASH, they have them. They have a plexiglass all around, no doors. We took the doors off, and uh, the gas tanks are right behind your head. So they're sitting back here. And we took a round in one of the gas tanks, and the fuel ran out before we could get back and land safely. So the pilot did something called auto rotation, and we came down hard, but we were inside our base camp.
Okay, well, that's a relief. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, at no point were you ever captured by enemy
Oh,
forces?
no. No, no.
Yeah.
That is the worst thing that could happen.
Mhm.
That's the absolute worst thing that could happen. No, if I had been captured, I probably would not be talking to you. That is the only time in my life that I have ever contemplated suicide. If capture was intimate, I felt that I would probably shoot myself before I would let them capture me.
And is that like a procedure, like a protocol that they taught you in the military, or is that more so of
No,
a personal
no,
decision?
it's a personal decision.
Mhm. And you were more like worried about like torture, or what would be the reasoning?
Yeah, the torture,
Mhm.
the torture. And they would torture you for information. And being an intelligence guy, I knew information.
Mm. That makes sense. Yeah.
So,
Did you have like anybody, I guess, since you were like an officer, like somebody in like a lower rank that you could like pass stuff on to, or that was like already there? Should that happen?
say again now? No, no,
No, you didn't.
no. The two of us, no. The information that I had was mostly in my head, and it wasn't something that would be passed on. I mean, it could be it could be knowledge of the enemy force that had shot us down or something like that.
Mhm. All right. Wow. Um, that sounds stressful. What did you do to like, I guess, calm down, like to keep your nerves down? Because I can only imagine, as an officer, being in charge of so many people, you must have done something to be able to relax, to unwind.
Uh, in where now? I was in charge of 150 people at Fort Bragg, not in Vietnam. I didn't have that many people in Vietnam. I see I had 7 helicopters and crew.
Mhm.
I had about 20 people
Okay.
all total in Vietnam.
All right.
So I wasn't a battery commander there.
That makes sense. And how long were you in the military before you were put in Vietnam?
Before what?
Before you were put in Vietnam?
3 years.
3 years.
Mhm. Let's see, I went in I believe it's 3 years. I went in, let's see, 63, about 2.5 years.
Okay. Let's see. Another question I have written out here. Let's see. So many Americans were opposed to the war in Vietnam for a lot of different reasons. Um, some claimed the conflict was a war against Vietnamese independence or an intervention in a foreign civil war. And others opposed it because they felt it lacked clear objectives and appeared to be unwinnable. Many anti-war activists were themselves Vietnam veterans, as evidenced by the Organization of Vietnam Veterans Against the War. Did you yourself have any doubts or opposition to your involvement in Vietnam, or you or America? And if so, how did you deal with it?
I was apolitical. I had most officers,
Mhm.
I would say 98% of the officers do not want to know the politics of a country. Because if you're in, let's say, if you're in the US Army, you can go anywhere in the world to fight. We're sitting here today and we could go to, Germany
Mhm.
and fight a war in Germany. Or we could go to Ecuador and fight a war in Ecuador. You can't know the politics all over the world. So it's best to be apolitical and not have any political leanings. The major thing that any officer or any soldier has to do is complete the mission. You're given a mission, and that is your sole focus, or should be your sole focus.
Okay. So like if I guess anytime a soldier or an officer or anyone has, I don't know, an emotional tie to someplace or they just don't want to carry out a mission, do they voice that to an authority and like hey, I want to like I guess drop the military? Like how would they go about doing that?
That would be very serious. Do you mean if the person left the army, ran away?
No, so like for me, like my parents are from Mexico, and let's say I got into the US Army and they're like, hey, we're gonna fight against Mexico. And I'm like, hey, I've got family there, I don't want to do that. So like how would I go about doing that?
You would come to your battery commander, let's say, who would send that request up the chain of command, meaning to the battalion commander, and he would send it up. I don't know at what level somebody would make a decision of yes, you can, or no, you can't. But it would be way above me.
Okay. And
those things are, that is highly, I can understand why you say that, but I have never heard of a case like that.
yeah,
I haven't personally, but I can understand why you say that.
Mhm. Yeah, I was just wondering.
One thing I do know,
Mhm.
don't try to do it on your own. Don't run away, because then you become, if there is a war, I don't want to use your Mexico.
Mhm.
Let's say you're from Ethiopia, and there's a war in Ethiopia, and you don't want to go, and you leave your unit and run away.
Mm.
That's called, if there is a war going on, that could be considered desertion. And you would go to prison for many years for that, for doing it that way.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
That's really not, I've never heard of anybody trying that, but they might.
Yeah. Okay. I'm glad that nobody you know of at least got in trouble for it. So that's good.
Right.
Um, all right. You might have touched on this already, but what do you think was one of the most difficult things to go through while you were in the military?
The most difficult thing.
Or things, if you believe that there's multiple.
The most difficult thing was probably a fun thing as well.
Mhm.
And that was keeping when I was a battery commander, keeping my battery ready to go anywhere in the world within, let's say, a week or less.
Mhm.
That was difficult, but it was also challenging
Mhm.
because you have all sorts of characters in your battery. I'll tell you about one fellow. He to this day, I don't know if he was playing crazy or if he was crazy. I don't know which, but we were losing people who were going to Vietnam, getting orders to go to Vietnam. And this guy would not do anything unless he was specifically told to do it. I'll tell you how specific you had to be with this guy. He, when lights went out, you were supposed to go to bed. He wouldn't go to bed unless you told him, go to bed. He wouldn't go to bed. He would go to bed with his clothes on unless you told him to take his clothes off before he went to bed. The same way with eating, going to chow. Chow is food. Going to eat, unless you told him specifically to do that, he wouldn't do it. I sent him to the shrink. Shrink sent him back. Sent him to the shrink again. Some of my sergeants took him out to teach him to drive a vehicle. They don't call them cars in our trucks in the Army, they're vehicles. And so they had him out in the woods and they told him to, okay, go toward that tree. He's driving along straight to the tree, and he would have hit the tree if they hadn't grabbed the wheel.
Wow.
I don't understand how he got to us being a unit that was ready to go to fight. I don't see how he got through training. I don't see how he got through jump school, that's airborne school.
Mhm.
He would have killed himself. So that's why I thought he was crazy.
It's pure dumb luck, maybe.
Or
Real
either
quick,
playing crazy.
maybe. Real quick, you said you sent him to shrink. What's shrink?
Say again?
You said that you sent him to shrink. What's
Yeah.
that? What's shrink?
Oh, the Army has shrinks.
I don't know what that is.
Yeah. Oh, a shrink is a psychiatrist.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, nothing's wrong with him.
Yeah, they sent him back. Nothing
Huh.
wrong with it.
Huh. Well, they might have gotten that wrong.
And I sent him more than once.
Mhm.
Same guy. And this is the way I understand the Army is not this way anymore, but it was then. I used to have an inspection where I would inspect my troops. Where they lived, they would have a locker, a foot locker, what was called a foot lockers, like a trunk. And everything's supposed to be in a certain way in there. All right. If in this case, I had it with this guy, as usual, his foot locker was messed up. Okay, normally we worked a half day on Saturday and let them go and give everybody a pass for the rest of the weekend, meaning they could go downtown Fayetteville or wherever they wanted to go, so long as they were back on Monday morning. Well, because this guy screwed up, I took the weekend pass away for his entire floor. Everybody on his floor. Yeah. So when I came in Monday morning, I saw this guy. His eye was swollen and he had these little scratches all over his face. I said, ask the sergeant who was in charge of that floor, what happened to him? Sir, he fell down the steps. Oh, yeah? What I found out they had done, they knew that he was the cause. I had told them that he was the cause of them not having their weekend pass. They put a bar of soap in a sock. They threw a blanket over his head, and then they beat him with this bar of soap in a sock. Then you remember I said he wouldn't do anything unless he was told to do it. He wouldn't take a shower unless he was told to do it.
Oh my goodness.
Now they have one of the jobs that they had to do was scrub the floor with these very stiff bristle brushes. And they would scrub the showers floors with those. Well, they decided to give this guy a scrubbing without any water. So they used these brushes on him, and that's where those little cuts were coming from. But guess what? That didn't help him.
Wow.
I finally ended up getting him discharged from the service as, I've forgotten what they call it, 209, Article 209, unable to adjust to military service.
Okay. Wow.
And that's the way I finally got rid of him.
Yeah, I mean that sounds crazy. I don't know how he stayed alive, really.
One of the sergeants broke some of his ribs one time because he was just so outrageous.
Crazy. Even with a broken rib, he just would not listen.
No.
That's next level stubborn.
That they can't do today. In today's Army, they can't do that.
Would it be, do you think it would be easier to get somebody like discharged for something like that more easily now?
If somebody did that today in today's Army, they would be what's called court-martialed. Court-martialed means brought up on charges for beating him up like that. They won't let you do that anymore.
Okay.
But, and this is going to sound crazy, I think we're too soft now if we can't do things like that.
Mm.
Because as I understand it, the Soviet or the Russian special forces will actually shoot each other to see how well they can withstand the pain and if they can fight through the pain. That's who we're going up against.
That's crazy.
Yeah. War is terrible.
Mm.
War is not like anything you've ever experienced. And in order to be ready for it, you have to do anything close to physical injury in preparing you for it, because it's terrible.
Yeah, that sounds awful. Well, I mean, thank you for your service, honestly. I mean, I knew that you were like an officer, but I didn't know like how like like important you were. So yeah, thank you for everything.
Well, that wasn't any more important than the lowest private.
Mm.
If he does his, I can't do my job unless he does his job.
Yeah. Mm. All right. I got a few more questions here. But if you want to wrap up, that's
No,
completely
we
fine.
can go ahead.
Okay. Let's see. What's one of the biggest pieces of wisdom you gained while you served?
Mental toughness. How to be mentally tough, as opposed to physical toughness as well. But don't let things get you down. Drive on through whatever difficulties you may encounter. Keep a positive attitude and know that you can do it no matter what it's going to take. I'm going to do this.
Hmm. That's good. Yeah. Did you find yourself needing to do therapy or anything afterward just because of your experiences or no?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes, I have, to this day, I have PTSD. It will never go away. So the shrinks tell me, but it's manageable with medication and or talking to them.
Mhm.
But
But I'm glad that it's manageable at least.
say again.
I said that that's a shame that you, I guess, have PTSD, but I'm glad that it's manageable at least.
Yes, manageable. I don't think anybody who saw combat, and everybody who is in there doesn't see combat,
Uh-huh.
but everyone who saw combat, I would say they have PTSD to some extent.
Right.
Now, something else you should know. For every infantry soldier, and these are the guys running around on the ground with rifles, and they're the ones that go face to face with the enemy. For every one of them, there are 7 soldiers who are supporting him in some sort of way. And they don't necessarily ever see the enemy. So, for instance, you have people who run the post office, you have medics, you have hospitals, you have doctors, you have nurses, and that's where you will find the women. Or you would then. You will find you have a division is self-contained. How do you get your supplies? Where does your food come from? They bring all of that in.
Mhm.
All of these people who are your support people, the ammunition that you use, where does it's got to be able to get to where it's supposed to go? How do all the vehicles keep running? How do all the airplanes and helicopters keep flying? You have to have maintenance and mechanics for all of that.
Yeah, it's so well, I didn't realize how much went into it. You said that you saw combat, which makes sense. If you don't mind me asking, did you take anyone's life while you were in the military?
Probably, but I don't know. It would have been as a result of firing artillery from the air.
Right, okay.
In other words, like in that battle that I was, when we got shot down,
Right.
when I was firing all those batteries, I am sure somebody died as a result of that. But did I ever see somebody that and kill them? No.
Okay. And did you feel any guilt knowing that you likely killed somebody, or did you feel, I guess, not as guilty because of who we were up against?
No, I didn't feel guilty because I knew if I didn't get them, they would get me.
That makes sense.
That was a question that I felt, a feeling that I felt when I first got over there. And the answer that I just gave you is what my wife gave me. And she was right.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, it can be a scary thought, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Let's see. How did your service and experience affect you after you left?
When I left the service, I went to work for Citibank in New York City. Mm-hmm. And they were looking for officers who were getting out because we were going to become managers at Citi. Mm-hmm. And they were looking for officers who had experience managing people. So it prepared me. If you think of it, there were stair steps. Mm-hmm. My degree allowed me to get the commission into the Army. The commission opened the door for me to go into corporate America. Mm-hmm. The commission and the degree together.
Right. And that's when you became a senior vice president?
Yeah, so later, I worked myself up from that entry level mm-hmm. up to when I retired senior vice president.
Right. Yeah. That's super impressive, managing all that. These big companies, all these important people. Yeah.
Well, I think I had something like 8,000 people at the end.
Mm-hmm. Budgets more than 20 million and staffs in excess of 8,000 located in 5 states and Puerto Rico. And then you were also in charge of the Metro card, right?
Yeah. Now, when the Metro card was launched, let me give you an idea of the enormity of that job. Mm-hmm. That was the biggest job I've ever had. There are 8 million people who ride the buses and subways in New York City every day. 8 million. Mm-hmm. They speak 102 languages or dialects. We were to be the customer service unit that would support the introduction of the Metro card, which was replacing a token. So now you've got a new way to get on the bus, a new way to get on the subways. And all of these people, we had to be able to talk to them. And so when the guy who recruited me said, I don't know anything about customer service, but you tell me what you want. I'm giving you a building. And they did. They gave me a building in the middle of Manhattan. And he said, tell me which floors you want, and we'll go from there. Now, I have to figure out, what is this organization going to look like? What kind of equipment and computer equipment do I need? Where do I get it? What kind of furniture and equipment do I need? I need people that go with this organization that's in my head that I'm going to set up. So I set up a call center, an incoming mail unit, and a walk-up facility. So they could get us by mail, by phone, or walking up to our place. And recruiting that staff and training that staff, all by a certain date, which was a predetermined date that the entire system was going to switch over to the MetroCard. Now there are 420 subway stations and there are 3,500 buses. And all of them are going to switch over at midnight on X date. And I had to be ready. From scratch, from nothing, from a building, an empty building with nobody in it.
Yeah, I was reading through your biography. I'm like, wait, this guy came up with the entire concept, like start to finish. That's impressive. It's a huge project. And I've never been to New York City. So is the MetroCard still used today?
Is it still used?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Wow. Yes. Here is, I don't know. Can you see that?
I can, yeah. Yep, MetroCard. Wow.
To give you an idea of the size of the MTA, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority, has 600, what is it? Some humongous number of people, 600,000 or something like that employees to run those trains and buses.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's just really, I'm blown away. Like I knew I said I'm blown away. Like I knew you were in the military and that you did, that you worked for the bank, but I wasn't aware of your involvement in MetroCard till I read your thing earlier today.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's crazy.
Believe it or not, I have never worked in a branch. Never.
Really? So you just planned it and you're like, I'm out.
Well, my job was to keep people out of branches, try through the use of automation. And what I found out was that doesn't keep them out. They'll use both. People will use both automation and they'll go into the branch.
All right. I think that's all I wanted to ask, but if you have anything you want to add, I am more than welcome, or I'm more than happy to hear you out.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. That's the first thing.
Of course, yeah, I'm happy to have you here. Yeah.
Say again?
I said I'm very happy to have you here. I'm glad that you were able to make the time for this.
And I hope you are successful in whatever you do with it.
Honestly, it was going to be more of a just to kind of have it around as like a collection. But if I do publish it, I'll be sure to let you know.
Please do.
Yeah.
Please do.
Yeah, I was also reading through your biography, and I was going to do this for a different, I guess, episode or chapter or whatever. Your involvement in the civil rights movement. because I know that like military is such a huge thing, and also civil rights and segregation and racism,
Right.
and how it's some racial tension is still prevalent today. And I was hoping to do um, another one of these sessions in the
That
future to
would
speak
be
about that.
wonderful. Because I was going to say that's too big to put in.
Yeah, yeah, I didn't want to do like military and then also that, because I
Yeah.
felt like, you know, we might need some time to think about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll
I'd be happy to
think of
do
some
that.
questions, send them your way to have you just think about them.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, Mr. Nichols.
Well,
Yeah.
good luck.
Thank you. All right, you have a great rest of your night, okay?
Keep hope alive.
Yes, sir. All right. See you, Mr. Nichols. Bye.
Okay. Good night.